MGM scenic facility. No, there's nothing archival about masking tapes.
Yes.
Every archive is cringy. All right, yeah. So these are part of the mural. These are the murals from Shoes of the Fisherman.
Oh wow. At the premiere of this film, the clergy had come, and George Gibson was sitting behind some of the members of the clergy, and they were furious because they had said that the filmmakers had promised not to be in the cathedral.
Oh.
And they were furious, and he didn't ever reveal that they never were in the cathedral.
Great, Scott. We've made connection.
Yay!
Norma Shear and her glory.
So when was this made? 1938.
Yes, I'm sorry? I haven't been issued a case number. Okay. This is the student prints, 1950, 1954.
He's trying to remember
the
who would have been working at MGM at that time.
1956 at that time. It was like Wayne Hill
And Clark would still be there,
Robbins.
yeah, all right.
And let's see, Duncan Spencer probably working.
Was Ben Correa still there?
Probably.
It amazes me the thread. If Gary hadn't bought them,
Yeah, I kept this one.
if Gary hadn't stored them, if he
Well,
wasn't still
absolutely.
alive, and if he has this memory of all of them.
There it is.
That's it.
Yeah, so that's still in your inventory.
It's on the website. It's in our inventory.
Yeah, okay. As long as it's safe. This is North by Northwest, it's the
Yeah.
UN lobby. But I always thought this was
It
just
is.
one big old matte shot, but come to find out that this whole section is, something for the live action to be in front of. And they kissed it together, in this matte so beautifully. You just don't know.
What about that one that was put together end to end opposite?
Oh, that was amusing.
It's one that
Let me
has
ask
two
you about
flanking
this.
wings
Yeah,
and a flat,
that was
but they're like
that
this.
happened today, and we
It's
were
flat on each
scratching our
side,
heads,
and then
going, "What were they drinking?"
Splits apart. I think it's obvious.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
like,
this
I
one.
wanna be on their dress.
It's from Shoes of the Fisherman. It's a tapestry,
Oh, that's what it is.
but it got sewn together wrong.
Well, somebody must have done it at some point in time. I know it was not us.
Cars like this.
No.
It's two cars.
Some sci-fi.
It's a nice little
Yeah.
a one-point perspective kind of thing. But
I think that was
at the moment,
That's
doing weird things. But we're all looking at it going, yeah, no. If you just surf it, we're gonna correct it in Photoshop. Going there.
Thank you. I think Mark and I are available to ask questions. Yes, sir.
Two questions. You have control of 207, but how many is Jason Backings still there?
Thousands.
In their inventory?
I'm not sure the number, but thousands.
Many.
Many. So they still have extraordinary important backdrops in their inventory. They have the big North by Northwest heads, the Mount Rushmore. They have the hills of heather from Brigadoon. They have Hello Dolly backdrops. They have Sound of Music. They have My Fair Lady. On and on and on.
If you want to see a lot of the ones that they have, they're in the book.
They're in the book.
How would they value by the studio for budget purpose? Was it like they were allotted $5,000,
Oh.
$2,000 a
My only insight into how much those backdrops would cost to paint comes from that interview that you saw with George Gibson. So they said they would spend $1,500 on the backdrop in 1938 to make it something really special. I think when you're coming towards this time period, I'm guessing it's at least 15,000, maybe 20. I'm guessing it's in those ranges because, like, when you think of the backdrop, if you've seen the terminal, that was a 650-foot backdrop wrapping the entire airport. That would have, I guess, been much more than that. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
You mentioned the matte paintings that with the backdrop.
Yes.
Is that like solid on the wall kind of thing?
The matte paintings, oftentimes they were painted on glass, or they're actually matte shot that were their exposure. So a section of the matte would be black, so they would shoot it, and then they would reshoot the film. And Mark is more the expert here on shooting film, but this is the sister art to I don't know if you've seen the book, The Invisible Art. It's a wonderful book about matte painting specifically, and this is the other sister invisible art, as opposed to being maybe 10, 15 feet wide. Some of these were hundreds of feet wide, as you could see, these backdrops.
Yeah, matte painting would be the miniature version
The miniature
of
version.
these.
Right. Yes.
After unrolling the tapestry, then sometimes you, or backdrops, sometimes you folded them and sometimes you re-rolled them. Why would some get folded instead of re-rolled?
In terms of these backdrops or backings, some of them were already on battens. So they were rolled back onto the battens. So they're ready to hang.
Where the production number is, that's written on the batten.
Right. And you could see
these
also
all have-
there's a batten at the bottom too, so it's holding tension. So it's nice keeping them nice and even. They don't get folds in them. Some of them were too large to put onto battens. Yes, ma'am, and I'll be with you next. Muslin. Heavyweight muslin, but it's thin fabric. It's thin fabric. Well, it's not like canvas. It's not heavy in that sense. It's a heavyweight muslin though, so the weave is tight enough to keep light from leaking through. If that makes sense. Yes.
About that in the book about the paint itself.
We talk a little bit about that, but not really. It's not specifically a technical how-to book, which I am very interested in creating the next kind of book that really looks at these paintings from this recovery project at large scale, then in detail, and then in detail, and then in detail, and deconstruct it, and hopefully include information from these scenic artists I've interviewed. So when I was interviewing them, I was looking at the overarching history, but I am a painter. So I was asking all sorts of painting questions for my own desires to pass this information forward, for me to get better as an artist, but for anybody I work with to transmit this information. So I'm hoping there will be some sort of more technical kind of painting information, but this book is as big and glorious as it is for the history, but it was to try to create an artifact that at least echoes the grandeur of the work.
You have a question here.
Yes.
Without screen credits, how did you go about finding the artists attributed to each backing?
That was a fascinating journey. So when this project first came about, the Art Directors Guild actually put me into a room. They made a list of the best living scenic artists that they could connect me with. We started there. So it's really unusual that I've come to this not as a film historian. I've come to this from the view of a painter out. And so these interviews are coming from the artists out. And so I interviewed this group of scenic artists, and then we moved back. And their mentors, and their mentors, and their mentors, back. And who do they find are the finest of their industry? Who were their heroes? Who are they emulating? And so that's how this, and then a lot of digging. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I worked with Bob Wolf. Now, I don't know if I saw him in any of that, but he was working with Overbeck, Clark Robbins, all of them, and at MGM.
At MGM.
I was in a box.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this, I have a lot of Bill Gibson's, George Gibson's old painting equipment, Dutch brushes.
Oh, fantastic.
Because when Bill was in his 80s, Bob Wolf called me up and another art smart and said he would get rid of all of his scenic equipment. And so I got a paint frame and a travel box. And
Oh, that's incredible.
spent $50 and he brought $50. So all of this equipment.
That's amazing. And William Gibson is George Gibson's brother, who was a scenic artist as well. That's incredible.
And the largest backup I worked on was 400 feet.
400 feet. What film?
Yeah, dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs.
Or the TV show that went around, they call it surround, it goes around 3 walls.
Oh, that's great. Was that at Warner Brothers?
Paramount, the Farrell Brothers.
The Farrell Brothers. The Farrell Brothers. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the twins.
I only saw men in the photos.
It's a fine observation.
When did women get involved? Were allowed to be involved?
I would say the 1980s, and it was earlier, 70s, 80s.
Cassidy.
And it was Warner Brothers was the first ones to let them in, and Ed Strang was the first one to let women in, and definitely Die Hard, and
I tried to get in
Yeah.
with Joe Cleese, he wasn't hiring girls. But I
No.
was Paramount, Universal, Warner Brothers.
so late 70s, mid to late.
I started in 78, There were women, Francine West, Linda Cassidy.
Who are also they're mentioned in the book as well.
Yeah, Marion Dyes.
Marion Dyes and Marion Westall.
Yeah, and they started early.
And they were definitely not, they kept their job because of their abilities, not from any nurturing or any necessarily.
Part of the men.
Right.
Say that.
So they had to tenaciously hang on to those jobs.
Great question.
Yes, yes, sir.
Question and a comment. So did all of these backings in the project come from JC backings, or did they come from other sources?
All of these backdrops from the Backdrop Recovery Project were from JC Backings Holdings.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
Relating to the question about CGI.
Yes, yeah.
So living in Culver City, I had a chance to go several times on the tours every year, and got to visit the scenic backdrop.
Yeah.
And ask questions. And one of my questions back then was why even have these when you could do CGI now? And they said, well, the cost per minute for CGI, it's actually cheaper. I don't know if that's still true.
Or the cost per minute for...
To have the painted backdrops than it is to actually do CGI backgrounds.
Right.
One of
Might be an answer.
one of JC Backing's techniques now, as Karen mentioned, is many backings. For instance, if they were going to shoot something in Vegas now, they photograph it. They take high resolution cameras and they do photos, and they have humongous printers, and they will make a photograph, and it will be photorealistic because it's a photo.
And their company is thriving.
Can't do that, no.
And they're thriving because they adapted. Right, yes. Hello.
2 questions because I had my hand up for ages.
Sorry. I should have veered right, yes.
All spot better.
The first is, at one point you said that the artists had their, I can't remember what phrase you used, but they had their own kind of style. And I thought, well, how would that work? Because surely the most successful backdrops would be the ones that were the most realistic.
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't have thought there'd be much room for stylization.
There is definitely, yes, you're correct. The work of the scenic artist is to be able to live in one unified, create a unified vision and a unified appearance. There were definitely experts, like sky experts, architecture, foliage, like Bob Overbeck was foliage kind of expert, Atkinson, sky for sure, Ben Carre, architecture, and but there was definitely a flair and a hand, and there's also even just a distinction of this, like the feel of an MGM backdrop versus what was happening when John Coakley left MGM and started working in JC Backings on his own company and 20th Century Fox. His style of painting was much more fluid, much less systematic. MGM had a system. They had like a 1, 2, 3 system, and they would be able to train all of the scenic artists to work within that understanding. We do this step, we do this step, we do this step, so we can keep this cohesive look. And I've heard John Coakley being described as a very emotional painter, where it wasn't a step-by-step. He would dip his brush into like 3 colors or 4 colors and move through the painting. If you took a closer look at, I could maybe pull it back up, of The Sound of Music backing. So it's very open brush strokes, even drips in places, and there's just a different aesthetic style. There's also, it's interesting you talk about styles and different artists and hands. Gary Coakley was quoted in talking about sometimes the hardest part of his job was keeping the peace between the artists, because one would go on break and the other one paint something over. Right? And this is a great story of Harry Tepker, where he was always smoking, another MGM scenic artist who you saw back here, he was always smoking his pipe and standing and looking at what he was going to paint. And then Chris Coakley, young Chris Coakley, said he would look over and see, like, standing there smoking, and he'd work, and he'd look back, and there's a huge section done, and he's standing there smoking his pipe. And Chris one day asked him, Chris, he's in his 20s, young guy, asked him, he's like, how do you paint so fast? He's like, I do it right the first time. Right? So, yes. Yes.
There were these thousands of backdrops. Why did they keep them? did they ever overpaint them?
Sometimes, yes, overpainting them. They kept them as assets. So for MGM, if they had these Paris backdrops, we have these Western backdrops, we have these English backdrops. You got it over and over in films. Yes, ma'am.
Salvador Dali himself painted at Rock Studios, a painting one of Alfred Hitchcock's films. Was it Spellbound?
Spellbound.
Yeah. And they sold it for quite heavy penny.
We have a photograph of Dali painting into that backdrop. But the only reason why any of these exist today is because, well, first, they were hidden in plain sight. So they survived the big purge, the studio purge. They're up on a wall, hidden in plain sight. Second, they were rentable assets. They were working backdrops. During this book project, J.C. Backings kindly opened up the scenic studio space and had exhibitions throughout the course of the research for the backdrop book. And little did I know this was the last exhibit. Mark got to go. And Lynn Coakley, not Lynn, Jackie, who you saw with the shorter blonde hair, looked at me as I was about to head off into that elevator down for my last time. She said, "You keep calling these a collection, but they're just working backdrops." I'm just like, but you don't know what you have. They're like, well, they did. They were working backdrops, and that's why they were there. They were there to do their work. And
they did not save Wizard of Oz drops, though.
No,
right?
But that was before. That was way before the Coakleys got involved. That was MGM. So some things didn't last.
Just a couple more questions. I want to remind you guys, first we got the raffle. And then also we want to remind you to go over to the Arc after. So it's around the back of the building. We've got the displays we want to show you. So a couple more.
Yes, first.
What were the challenges after recovering them, of photographing them, like getting the center line and like how high did the camera have to be in order to get it like as a perfect square and like without distortion and things like that?
Melinda Sue Gordon, she's a total pro. She was up on ladders doing what she needed. I have no doubt.
We could always tell how big the drop was because she just start picking up her ladder and walk to the back end of the stage.
Dragging forward. Yeah. Yes.
Those archival photos are available for free for us to look at?
I don't know. I'm hoping they'll become part of a book. I'm hoping.
They're not available online for us to zoom in and look and learn?
I'm not sure what the plan will be with the Art Directors Guild's archives about that. But I'm hoping that's part of a publication. That's short order from now. That's my dreaming, scheming. Yes?
How did J.C. Backings decide of these thousands that they have, which ones to give you guys?
I believe it has to do with which ones were most rentable, which ones were damaged, which ones. So some of these were
the dirtiest ones.
Right.
Hope.
So when I got introduced to this idea of this backdrops program, the list that I saw was quite extensive of the original backdrops that were rescued. And then I asked the question as to where are they sending the backdrops to? When I spoke with Thomas, which Mark graciously gave me the introduction. And he said a lot of them are going to colleges. You also confirmed that. New York has a beautiful art backdrop school that they're sending them to. Some have gone to Scotland, some have gone to many places in the world now where these backdrops are actually being used as a teaching tool. But when I asked, well, where is Meet Me in St. Louis? And was there backdrops from Wizard of Oz? I didn't really hear an answer about that. But the question was primarily the Academy. The Academy kind of received a lot of the cream for preservation for historic purposes, is that correct?
And hopefully I'm hoping exhibition purposes, but I don't know their plans.
I think I remember somewhere hearing they had about 70 of them, or were going to be given 70.
They also received all that small sketch that I showed you from Forbidden Planet, that sketch painting. They received all of those paintings. They received there were file cabinets full of research photographs that the painters were painting from. I found a gridded photograph of the original Mount Rushmore, images taken by the production designer or his team. to replicate for the backdrop. So it's a huge amount of history in that space, in that building, and I'm so happy to say that that scenic art space there's still a backdrop up there from Mount Rushmore. There's still paintings being painted in there. They have an agreement with J.C. Backings and Sony where they could still paint pieces in there. So it's still being painted on.
And hopefully they'll keep that building there.
Hopefully they'll keep that building. People of Culver City, say it's a historic society. Make it happen. Save that building. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.